If you clicked on this video, you think that you might be pregnant. So what we're going to cover today are the very, very earliest signs of pregnancy. We're going to look at the signs between ovulation and a missed period in the 2-week wait. So what everyone is going to tell you is don't overthink it, just wait and see if you miss your period and then take a test. And while this is fantastic advice, we are human. And judging by the fact that you're here watching this video, and if you're anything like me, you're gonna be obsessing over the internet and trying to find any information you can. I remember being in a state checking every possible thing to see if it was a symptom, like, is sneezing 3 times in a row an early pregnancy symptom? No, joke, but there are many symptoms out there. We're gonna look at the legitimate ones, and we're going to look at timing. I used to think that fertilization, when sperm meets egg, means you're pregnant. It's not that simple. You're not actually pregnant yet. So we're gonna cover the biology in a little more detail. So today we're going to cover the biology of pregnancy, which is a really important foundation. Then we're going to look at symptoms, which is why you're here. We're going to look at early miscarriage, which is an uncomfortable but important topic. And finally, we're going to look at lifestyle changes that you might need to make. So let's dive in to the biology of pregnancy. So the very first step is fertilization. So I talk a little bit about this in my video on how to conceive, so check that out if you haven't already. So in fertilization, sperm meets egg, and immediately you have all of the sets of genes and chromosomes that are going to determine girl or boy, hair color, eye color, if they're going to be good at math. All those things are already in that tiny bundle of cells, which is just magic. So this isn't when you're pregnant though. So as this little bundle of cells, which are dividing, so they're dividing and becoming more and more cells, then this little morula, which is Latin for mulberry, because it kind of looks like a mulberry, it travels slowly down the fallopian tube. It takes a few days for it to travel down the fallopian tube. It's heading for the womb, the uterus. And while it's traveling, it continues to divide, so the cells are multiplying, but it stays the same size. So it stays the same size, but within the inside, it's dividing. On around day 5, this morula turns into a blastocyst. So it looks very similar, but it's given a new name. And this is around the time that it enters the uterus. This is a momentous occasion, and now the blastocyst has the very important task of implanting itself into the lining of the womb. Generally, around the world, it's known that implantation equals pregnancy. Implantation usually happens around day 6 for most people, but it can take a few days for the blastocyst to implant itself into the wall, and sometimes it doesn't implant at all. So within the blastocyst, there are cells specialized to become the placenta and cells specialized to become the embryo. Once it's implanted, it already starts to produce the placenta, and the placental cells start to create HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. So HCG is commonly thought of as the hormone that gives us morning sickness and these sorts of symptoms, and it's also what a pregnancy test detects from our urine. Once the blastocyst is implanted, it takes around 6 to 7 days for there to be enough HCG to detect from a pregnancy test. And this is why, if you count those days, so it's around a week after ovulation that it implants, and then a week after that you can actually detect if you're pregnant from the HCG. And that pretty much comes to the day of your expected next period, which is why it is recommended to wait until you've missed your period by a day and then test. We'll get onto that in some more detail. If you're enjoying the video so far, please do like and subscribe. It's a fairly new channel, and I'm really excited to be here sharing my experiences and also my experiences of pregnancy so far. I'm 14 weeks pregnant. I'm also a prenatal yoga teacher, so I am going to be sharing a bunch of yoga videos as well for you to follow at various stages of your cycle and various stages of pregnancy. So thank you so much for watching, and let's continue on to the bit you really want to hear, which is symptoms. Symptoms. So it's really important to note that before implantation, you really can't expect any symptoms. So once you've ovulated, if you know roughly when that is, then count around 5 days. You should be usually around 6 days. And then you can start looking out for implantation symptoms. These are the very first symptoms that you could spot. So when the blastocyst implants into the lining of the womb, you can see light spotting, light bleeding, and you might be able to feel light cramping. So these are the very first possible symptoms. So what I did, because you already know I'm a psycho, I was so excited to find out if I was pregnant or not. I wore white underwear around those days so that if there was any spotting, I definitely see it. I didn't have any symptoms really around this time. I think maybe one day I was like, maybe this is implantation cramping, but also maybe it was just gas. So yeah, you're gonna pick up on every tiny thing. Then after implantation, you can look out for symptoms in your breasts. So for many women, these are the very first symptoms. It happens super early. Your breasts start to feel swollen, heavy, slightly sore. But then for lots of women as well, this can be a premenstrual symptom too. Other things to look out for, morning sickness can start, so nausea. And nausea can come with or without vomiting. Fatigue is a very common symptom. Again, most of these symptoms can also be felt when you're premenstrual, which is difficult, but you know your own body, so you can compare to the previous months. For me, I felt really tired, for sure. So the fatigue, it's almost like, at least for me, it was like that the day before you get sick, when you're just like, my body is just heavy. I feel like a sack of potatoes. These are the most common symptoms, but then you can also have aversions or cravings very early, so for foods. Mood swings, constipation, headaches, peeing more often, a metallic taste in your mouth, and bloating. So these are the less common, but many women also have these symptoms as well. And obviously, the later after ovulation, the more likely that you're going to get a few symptoms. So on the day of implantation, it's very unlikely you're going to suddenly have cravings for some crazy thing. So my personal experience, and of course this can be confirmation bias, it could just be random, but I felt really tired, but happy. And usually before my period, those few days, I feel a little deflated, a bit down, a little bit negative. But this time around, I was walking the dogs, looking at the flowers and the trees, just thinking, life is good. Like my body had a secret. So now we're going to talk about the uncomfortable bit, early miscarriage. It's really important to talk about though, because as many as 1 in 3 of fertilized eggs will not result in pregnancy. And this is really hard to detect in studies. So there's a lot of variance if you do research online on these figures. I've also read that between 20 to 65% of fertilized eggs don't make it to clinical recognition. By clinical recognition, I mean you go to the doctor, they do a test, and they confirm that you're pregnant. So there's a huge variety there. The thing to make clear is that a lot of eggs don't implant. So one figure is 10 to 40% of eggs don't implant, and then 10 to 25% of implanted eggs don't survive until clinical recognition. And there's lots of reasons for this. The body is able to detect if the egg is healthy, if it has any chromosomal abnormalities. The body wants to make sure that the egg is the healthiest possible egg to continue with the pregnancy and to put in all those resources. So it is for a reason, but it can be quite devastating, especially if you find out you're pregnant early. If you get an early pregnancy test, they do exist, but please don't buy them. If you do an early pregnancy test, find out that you're pregnant, and then just 3 days later, you're not anymore. And that can be upsetting. So this is another reason to wait until you've missed your period to take a test, and then still bear in mind that the chances of miscarriage are still high at these early stages. This leads us on to lifestyle changes. If you think that you could be pregnant, do you need to change your lifestyle in the 2-week wait? And I would say yes. Once the egg has implanted, it's sharing your blood flow. For that reason, I would cut out any harmful substances such as alcohol, smoking, drugs, and limit caffeine, unhealthy foods, stress. Look after yourself and imagine that you're already pregnant, because you might be, and just nourish your body. You also want to make sure that your body and your own hormones are regulated so that all of those processes that are going on can go on in a healthy way. One very interesting study was about sex during the 2-week wait. So when we have sex or when we orgasm, there are little contractions through the uterus. And if the egg is trying to implant into the womb and it's contracting, it's hard for it to implant, or it might even be kind of kicked off. So for this reason, around that window of implantation, so 6 to 10 days after ovulation, maybe consider avoid having sex during those days so that the egg can implant as best it can. So today we've talked about the 2-week wait. We discussed the biology, so implantation and the different changes in the body before and after implantation. We discussed symptoms, so the most common ones being implantation, bleeding and cramping, fatigue, nausea, tender, swollen breasts, and maybe a bunch of other ones, which we did cover. We discussed early miscarriage and the unfortunate likelihood that an egg does not implant, or that an egg implants but doesn't survive up until clinical recognition. And as a result, the importance of testing later rather than earlier. And finally, we talked about lifestyle changes. So what do you need to do in this 2-week wait to ensure that you have the highest chances of a healthy, successful pregnancy? Now what? So if you are in this 2-week wait window, try be as patient as you can. Fight the impulses to go out and buy an early pregnancy test. And I hope that when you do test, you have a positive result. But if you don't, remember that you have every month to try again. And if you haven't already, do check out my video on how to get pregnant fast. I got pregnant within the first month of trying, and I do attribute it partly to all these various things that I did to make sure my body and my partner's body were as healthy as possible to conceive a baby. And finally, just remember that I love this quote actually. It's Winston Churchill. Success is the ability to go from one failure to another without any loss of enthusiasm. So keep going, keep trying, and yeah, just sending you all my best wishes. And thank you for watching this video to the very, very end. I'm publishing videos every week, so stay tuned for the next video next week. Bye.